Heartless, Forbidden, Book 1. Written by Suzana Thompson. Narrated by Paulina Schubert. Chapter 10. I distinctly remembered the conversation I'd had with Mom about what first drew her to my dad. It was an unlikely match because Mom had been popular in high school, and Dad was more of a loner. He had a motorcycle instead of a car, and he took the bus to school in the winter. Her previous boyfriend drove her around in a Corvette, and he was also the most popular guy in their grade. My father loved him, she told me. That should have been my first clue that he wasn't the guy for me. Her father had also demanded to know why they had broken up, and Mom explained how she had discovered that he was cheating on her. "Did you sleep with him?" her dad had asked. "No," Mom had insisted, worried that he wouldn't believe her. "I swear I didn't." "Then you got nothing to worry about," he said. "You're the one he's gonna marry. He's just sowing his wild oats with the other girl. She's not the kind he'll bring home to meet his family." He expected her to get back together with her cheating boyfriend, but Mom had refused. She had sworn off dating, but she fell for my dad because he was different from the other guys she knew. He didn't even ask her out or try to flirt with her. He'd offered her a ride home one day out of the blue, and she'd only accepted it despite her ex-boyfriend. She had to wrap her arms around my dad's waist while she rode on his motorcycle, but he didn't get any ideas from the physical contact. He had driven her straight home and been the perfect gentleman. The rides home had become a daily thing, but she had refused his offer to drive her to school. She didn't want her father to see her with this boy he surely wouldn't approve of. He was at work when she arrived home from school, and she knew that her stepmother wouldn't tell on her. She started sitting with my dad during lunch. They talked about their plans for the future, and he told her about his dream to eventually open his own car repair shop. He was taking shop, and he would be spending the last 2 years of high school completing vocational training to become an auto mechanic. The conversations they had were like the ones she had with any of her friends, and they began to talk on the phone as well. Even if my father overheard me, he wouldn't know I was talking to a guy. If he had seen Tony, he would have assumed he was a bad boy out to seduce me. But Tony was so sweet and genuine. He was so down to earth and real. It had rattled me when Cade used the same word to describe me. While I liked the similarity to my dad, it disturbed me that Cade had been the one to make that assessment of me. It would have been nice to hear it from someone else rather than him. I didn't want to associate anything Cade had said with my mom's beloved reminiscences of my dad. Cade sent me a text message the following day telling me that the decorator would be at his house at 11, and that he would pick me up at 10:30, but I texted back that I already had a ride. When I texted Jenna, she replied that 10:30 was fine with her. Mom was home this morning, so I was able to confront her right away. "I don't want Cade driving me home from work," I complained. "He showed up last night and practically abducted me. He's just a complete pain in the butt, Mom. Will you please tell Robert that I don't need Cade driving me home anymore?" "He sent Cade to drive you home from work?" she questioned. "How did he even know your schedule?" "I thought you told him," I said. "No," she denied. "He didn't ask me anything about your work schedule. It was very sweet of Cade to drive you home, though." Cade and sweet did not belong in the same sentence. If she knew how critical he was of her behind her back, Mom wouldn't think he was so sweet either. "It was sweet of Robert to worry about me," I corrected her. "Cade just did it because Robert made him do it." "You should appreciate what Cade did for you," she chided me. "I hope you thanked him." "I did," I told her. "But will you get Robert to quit making him drive me home?" "I feel better knowing you're with Cade," she said. "You hear about so many terrible things happening to young girls these days." "Mom," I whined, "I work right down the street. I've always walked home from work. Why is it a problem all of a sudden?" "That's because you had no choice," she replied. "I know you're used to being independent. But there is nothing wrong with accepting help from people. You should be happy that Cade is already treating you like a sister." I have to admit, I was worried about how he would react to his father remarrying, but he has been wonderfully supportive. It was like we weren't even talking about the same person. She had no idea what Cade was really like. There was nothing wonderful or supportive about him, and he certainly didn't treat me like a sister. If she knew how many times he suggested that I should have sex with him, she would change her tune. She didn't know any of that, though, and I couldn't tell her. "He's annoying me," I complained, voicing the only part of the truth I could. She smiled in amusement. That's what brothers do. I could see that my complaints weren't going to convince her, so I resorted to pleading. Will you talk to Robert, please? Please, Mom? Okay, she relented. I'll talk to him, but he's just being protective of you. I know, I acknowledged, and I appreciate it, but I like my independence. What can I say? I'm a modern woman, I joked. It didn't make her smile. You're not a woman, Lexi. You're still a kid, but you've had to grow up too fast. I scoffed at that. Other people my age have jobs. I'm not the only kid at school who works. It doesn't mean I grew up too fast. It wasn't fair to you, she said. We should have been more careful. We should have waited. We were just too caught up in the moment. We didn't even think about birth control, and you were the one who paid the price for our selfishness. My heart constricted at hearing her say that. She had never expressed any regret before for one single minute with my dad, and I couldn't stand her spoiling the perfection of their love now. Selfishness? I exclaimed as I lashed out at her. You said that I was the embodiment of your love, and now you wish you hadn't had me? No, she responded in shock. How could you even think that? Because that's what you said, I retorted furiously. No, she insisted. I said I wish we would have waited until we were older to have you, when we could have given you more. Like after Dad died? I inquired maliciously, because then you wouldn't have had me at all. Her blue eyes were wide with shock and hurt. She looked like a lost little girl, and it emphasized how much younger she was than the mothers of my peers. I love you, she told me in a wounded voice. I could never wish I hadn't had you, but I always want more for you. You always want to give your kid everything, and your dad would feel the same way. He would have loved you just as much as I do. I know that, I said, because I had no doubts about my dad. She never had either until now, and it upset me that she was referring to their love as selfishness. I know how he would feel, but how do you feel? Do you regret being with him? And no, she exclaimed. No, Lexi, never, she insisted. I wouldn't trade you for anything. I love you, and I loved your dad. And there it was. Her love for him was in the past tense. She was letting go of what she felt for him now that she was marrying someone else. I tried to get the response I wanted from her. Do you think Dad would have wanted a son? My calmer tone calmed her down too, as I had intended it to. He wasn't like that. He would have been happy either way. I made one more attempt. He was special, huh? Yes, she agreed, and gave me a bright smile that broke my heart. It wasn't her special smile, the one I saw only when she was talking about my dad. That one was more soft and dreamy, and she didn't have it now. It had been replaced by a radiant smile that had nothing to do with reminiscing about her one true love. This smile was all about her present happiness, and it was probably the one she would have on her wedding day. I had assumed that she loved Robert if she was marrying him, but I thought that love could never be as strong as the love she had for my father. That was the kind of love you only found once in a lifetime. Or was that just a romantic fantasy? A horrible thought struck me. What if my dad hadn't died? Would my parents still be together? Lots of kids at school had divorced parents, but I had thought that mine were special. Only death could tear them apart. But was I wrong? Was it possible that they might have eventually broken up? I left our apartment that day feeling more disillusioned than when I'd found out that Lucas had only used me to win a bet. I was glad to get away from my mom, and even going to Kate's house was preferable to being with her and doubting her feelings for my dad. Thanks for picking me up, I told Jenna. She looked at me as I sat down in her car. Who died? She cracked. My dad, I stated darkly. There was a pause as I scowled while putting on my seatbelt. What? She gasped. It was a long time ago, I said. Oh, she replied uncomfortably. So do you have any ideas for your room? Robert hired a decorator, I answered, but I'd like something like what you did with your room. I hoped that she wouldn't be annoyed that I was copying her style. She brightened with excitement. That'll be amazing. You won't have to be limited by a budget, and you can make it spectacular. This is going to be so much fun. I was relieved that she was so enthusiastic about it, but Cade had to ruin everything. We hadn't even reached his doorstep when he came flying out of the house. "She's your ride? What the fuck, Lexi? I told you I'd pick you up." "I don't want you to pick me up," I stressed, hoping he'd get the reference to last night. "I want you to mind your own business." I took Jenna by the arm and tried to go around Cade. He stepped directly in front of her. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded in an icy tone. I answered for her. "She's coming with me. We're meeting with the decorator." His glacial gaze stayed fixed on her. "You're not setting foot in my house." I lost what little patience I had with him. "I can invite who I want to my room, and I'm sure your dad will let me have friends over. Do you really want me to bother him with this?" "We are done," he stated in the coldest manner possible, and turned his back on her to walk calmly back into the house. Jenna's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I've got to go." "No, don't let him win," I urged. "We can still—" She interrupted me with a broken voice. "I can't." I watched her flee to her car and quickly drive around the circular driveway and back down toward the street. Kate opened the front door as I stalked up toward it, and he moved back to allow me entrance like the polite host he wasn't. "Just like that?" I sneered at him. "We're done, that's all?" I added glibly. "This is not about you," he said in a neutral tone. "No," I agreed in disgust. "It's about Jenna. Remember her? She's one of the girls you're done with." He directed a bit of the coldness he'd shown her toward me. "I told you she was out." "Oh yeah," I remarked, "out like the trash. But guess what, Cade? She's a person, and you can't just throw away people." His expression hardened, and his eyes narrowed to a dangerous glint. "Tell that to her." He left me standing there with all kinds of questions swirling in my head. Was it possible that Jenna was the one who had done something to destroy their relationship? Was that why Cade was holding a grudge against her? It seemed unthinkable that he could be the innocent party in this situation. If she had thrown him away, like he had hinted she had, then why was she trying so hard to get him back? Why would she dump him if she loved him? I had thought that I had Cade figured out, but now I didn't know what to think.